Hello guys, gals and non-binary pals, I'm Dips and welcome back to the web, where once again the modding community has absolutely left CA in the dust with the release of a brand new race pack and faction for us all to sink our teeth into for absolutely free. Cataph's Sudden Realms just released on 3.0 on Steam, which I'll have linked down below, adding 8 new legendary lords alongside the brand new faction called the Southern Realms. Today we'll briefly go over the roster, including the 30 new units, as well as 18 regiments of renown, a brand new tech tree, and the new faction mechanic called the Plutocracy, which I think is actually the best part of the mod. While we can't cover everything in this short video, the aim here is just to give you guys a bit of a taster so you can go and check it out for yourself, so let's get into it. So, most importantly, what is the roster and how does it actually feel to play? Before we get into this, we need to cover that the Southern Realms are actually 4 different sub-factions, and each of the legendary lords belongs to one of them. We have the armies of Telia, who are based on heavy shielded infantry with a strong artillery, Estalia, who's a stronger focus on handheld powder units and immune to psychology, conquistadors, the Borderlands, who are stronger focus on skirmishing and mass ranged units, while the Colonials are kind of a jack-of-all-trade faction with access to some units from other factions. However, as a whole, the Southern Realms are a pretty interesting blend of Bretonnia and the Empire, just without that really strong cavalry premise for the early game. As you might have noticed, a lot of your low to mid-tier infantry, whether it be militia, spearmen, half-pikes, billmen, or pikes, are all anti-large, which kind of reflects that turtling style you're going for with a lot of pike and shot. That being said, depending what sub-faction you choose, a lot of your ranged units can be a little bit weak in the early game, especially since you don't get access to handgunners till I think a tier 3 building. Fortunately though, there are quite a few fun different units that are available early, like the Paymaster's Chest Wagon, which is actually a bit like the Empire's War Wagon, but instead it focuses on buffing your units, giving in courage, motivated heroism, and when it becomes low enough health, it gives you a -5 leadership buff for the entire army, but also for 50 meters around it gives a pretty strong buff for grab what you can, and I think it's just a really fun reflection of that mercenary style of army. In addition, the different campaigns feel pretty nice as well because, for example, Valmir, one of the Borderlands legendary lords, he gets access to Dwarven units, which is just kind of a nice way of keeping all the campaigns fresh, especially since there are 8 different campaigns to choose from. Also important to go over is the buildings for your armies, since they're actually pretty unique. For your first post or one settlement, you can't have both the city-state recruitment and the militia recruitment, they are both mutually exclusive. So, if you want to aim for a more hammer and anvil traditional type into your mid-game, you probably want to go with the city-state, as they give you access to Republican Guard, Duelists, and Broken Lancers if you hit a tier 3 settlement, but their tier 1 is pretty weak, with crossbowmen, pikemen, and billmen, which are also accessible to the mercenary recruitment. For the mercenaries, it's more of a ranged unit focus, but at tier 2 you get access to light scouts, who are a very devastating flanker, but a very, very light cavalry, and the Paymaster's Chest Wagon, which we went over, which gives some nice, decent buffs. Alternatively though, your tier 3 is completely different, as you get a ton of fantastic units for the city barracks, and the, I can't pronounce that, but this kind of missile cavalry. So as a bit of payoff, your early game will be quite a bit better, but by the time you're getting tier 4 settlements, you can probably have 2 or 3 different cities around there. So it's not a huge deal. Overall, the Southern Realms has quite a nice feeling roster, but if your legendary lord doesn't have any cavalry, I would focus on the mercenary start early just to make the early game a little bit more dynamic. Speaking of legendary lords, let's go over them quickly. Like I mentioned before, you have 8 to choose from, split into the 4 groups of Telia, Estalia, Borderlands, and Colonial. Estalia has access to Lupio, who is more of a traditional Empire-like legendary lord, focusing on gunpowder, infantry, and cavalry. Also for Estalia is Lucrezia, who focuses on different types of heroes she can recruit, whether it be mercenary captains or master duelists, which we'll go over in a second, and also just general diplomacy buffs. Telia has Borgio, who focuses on sieging and being besieged, and he gets a couple nice buffs for that, as well as his skill tree buffing Pavis crossbowmen and his unique regiment of renown. Besides that, you have Leonardo, who just has some general buffs to trade and diplomacy, but also a little mission to take control of Muragan Leono? I can't pronounce that. For the Borderlands, we have Valmir, who, like I said, gets access to some Dwarven units, can recruit rangers by himself, and has buffs for, well, it's easier for him to recruit Dwarven units when he has alliances with them. And Gashnag, who is a Strigoi vampire prince. Would love to hear the lore behind that one. And yeah, he's a pretty strong duelist. Death caster, or a shadow... No, I think he's a shadows caster, from memory. And obviously a pretty strong duelist as a vampire lord, and his skill tree gives him some pretty nice general buffs. For Colonial, you have El Cordova, who just hates the lizard men. You know, that's his whole thing, I guess. But he's the fantasy equivalent of Cortez. And then we have Marco Colombo, who gets on with him a little bit better. And let me say, there are a lot of snakes in Lustria, but this guy brought one more with him. Goddamn. Anyway, that's it for the Legendary Lords. So, what about the generic Lords and Heroes for the mod? For Heroes, you can get a Duelist, who specializes in, well, dueling. A Mercenary Captain, who is a hybrid unit. He has a sword and a shotgun, which is cool as hell. And he also grants a kind of a passive buff for his melee attack and reload skill. So he actually does very well with Pavis Crossbowman. On top of that, you get all the different flavors of Wizard. We got a couple of double ups. That's just how modding be sometimes. But yeah, you get Grey Wizard, Amethyst, Celestial, all the different flavors available to the Empire. On top of that, you also get the Priestess of Mimidia, who's also a very strong buffing troop and also anti-large. So she's like a Paladin. You pop her on a horse, she gets Faith's Bastion, which is flat damage resist, but also a lot of AoE, like Spear of Mimidia, and gives magical attacks, great against demons, and also Shield of Mimidia. So she's actually a pretty good hunter. Had really good success against her with the Skaven when they had their heroes on the giant Plague Bell or the different weird scooter things they have. So they're all pretty strong, and they all kind of come in with unique skills and abilities. For your generic lords, you get a Mercenary Captain, who's just reskinned version of the Empire's one. Bit boring, you know, but if you just want to pop him on a horse. You get the Merchant Prince, who's really fun. He actually grants debuffs and buffs to your own units, as well as debuffing and buffing your diplomacy. And finally, you have Pathfinder. He's sort of like the Wood Elves, but he has some really fun, different stealth mechanics. Like he's got Sneak, so he can make units around him unspottable. He can basically blind another unit, so they can't run away. And yeah, just a really fun, unique unit. So, this mod also comes with a brand new tech tree. As you can see, it isn't really a traditional chain one like the Lizardmen. These aren't normally filtered, and this is just from my campaign. But the way it works, you have these 3 different lines. You get 2 of them, and then you can get access to the 3rd. So you get any of the 2 previous ones, and then you get the stronger 3rd one, which is it's a pretty good deal. It's a pretty fun tech tree. You have like the more diplomacy route, or the trade and diplomacy. You have some generic, kind of like a couple random ones, like tactical superiority, better cav, better armor, and this is more your infantry route. They all start out at turn 15, which can feel a little bit slow, but overall it's not too bad. Like, it stands up to most of the vanilla ones. It's a lot better than the Lizardmen one they have currently. And as you can see down here, here's actually the tech tree for unlocking the Tortoise Tank, which also requires requires the, art workshops, the siege workshop, and etc, etc. And it costs a little bit of money. That unlocks the Tortoise Tank, that gives you extra capacity, and that gives you the Regiment of Renown for the Tortoise Tank. So there's a little bit of unlocking there, it's actually not too bad. The final thing we'll look at, and in my opinion the most interesting, is the Plutocracy. And this is just a reskin of the Dwarves' crafting mechanic, but honestly I just like it a lot more for this faction. The reason for that is largely because you're already incentivized to do a lot of trading with the different buffs to diplomacy you get, and also to rely on your income. So you already have a lot of trade deals going on, like in my campaign, so you have access to wine, spices, obsidian and such. And it just feels very intuitive. So you can use these to improve your leadership, get access to the majority of the regiments of renown that you'll see there, as well as get some faction-wide buffs, and these are pretty interesting, like the different strategies. So you get diplomacy initiatives or different military strategies to improve yourself faction-wide. And on top of that, you can also get, your basic weaponry and followers. And it just feels very smooth to kind of use. Like, it doesn't feel like you're trekking halfway across the map to go get wine to unlock your Regiment of Renown for this, like it did with the Dwarves sometimes. it feels, because you've already got all those trade deals, it kind of feels like, oh, well, now I've got access to that. And that's all we have for today. I definitely haven't covered everything in this mod. Probably about half of what there is a bunch of depth for the different sub-factions. But if you want to check this out, it is down in the description. And if you want something a little bit more in depth, I think the Great Book of Grudges released an hour-long video on this mod. So feel free to check that out if you've got the time. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you want to check out any of my mods, they are on the screen at the moment and linked down below. Dips out.